How many of y'all saw the movie The Da Vinci Code? Saw the Da Vinci Code? Shame on you, shame, shame, shame. But I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, because if you did, or if you heard about the Da Vinci Code, you may have heard about a place I want to describe to you. A place called Rosslyn Chapel, Scotland. Built way back in 1446. It was the worship place for one particular family. And Rosslyn Chapel, down through the centuries, has developed a reputation for being a thin place. And you may have heard me say that term before, thin place. There are actually lots of places on earth, holy places, sacred places, that some people consider to be thin places. Now, what do they mean by that? A thin place is simply a place where the veil between the earthly and the heavenly is very, very thin. Where the things of God and the things of human everyday existence merge. There's not much separating them. Or to say it one more way, the veil between what we think of as the real world and what we think of as the spirit world is paper, toilet paper thin. And so, in those places, the idea is, in those places, you can sense the presence of God more so than in other places. Now, I'm not teaching you that this is the way it is. I'm simply telling you what people consider to be a thin place. Well, I'd heard about Rosslyn Chapel ever since, I guess, that movie came out. And in 2010, I got to go on a trip to Scotland. Our little convoy, our tour group, stopped down in the village below Rosslyn. I looked at my watch, I looked at the schedule. I had like 45 minutes to get up to Rosslyn Chapel and back. I ran, I caught some kind of bus, or it wasn't a taxi. I caught some sort of machine that took me up there, ran inside. I think I had to pay my money and walked around. And I wasn't the only one there walking around. There were lots of people. And they were there for the same reason I was. They were curious. This thin place where you can feel the presence of the holy. You know what? I walked all over that place. I even ran down the same staircase that Tom Hanks ran down in the movie. But I didn't feel it. I didn't get it. If anything, it felt like a thick place. Now, why is that? Why was it on that day it felt thick? Well, it had a lot to do with the reason we were all there. Are you aware that churches ought to be thin places? Because all of us need thin places. We need places we can go one day a week, at least one day a week. And when we go there, oh, the line between the holy and the everyday merges. And the things of earth and the things of God are not separated. We recognize His presence. Every one of you have been to thin places. You've been to places where, in the words of an old song, when I walked in the door, I felt His presence. And I knew this was the place where love abounds. You knew that you were in the house of God. Thin place. There was a thin place at my grandmother's house in front of a blue-flamed, old-timey gas heater where I would sit and read my Bible morning after morning after morning for years. And that became a thin place for me. Here is the deal. It ain't about the place. It's about the spirit of the people in the place. How many churches have you been in? You went looking for a thin place. You went hoping that if I go to the house of God, God will be home. Only you walk in the door and you don't feel His presence. And this is not the place where love abounds. There's a whole bunch of other stuff abounding. This is the place where frowns abound. A place where this group sits over here and doesn't have much to do with that group. And all of them wonder, what in the Sam Hill are you doing here? Look at you like, you're at our church? There are, so sad, it's so sad, it's so sad. But there are thick places, thick churches. I've been in them. You've been in them. And one reason the majority of you have come to this place over the last 2.5 or so years, coming up on 3, really, is that you're tired of thick places. You've had enough of thick places. And by the way, one of the most important things I long for us to be is a place full of surprises. Because no matter what you tell your friends and coworkers about your church, CCF, well, other people tell them that too. And they are accustomed to disappointment. They're accustomed to going to the house of God. God's not home. What a disservice we do. What a bad reputation we give God. But there are some places so thick that if I were God, I wouldn't go either. I'd find somewhere else to go. In fact, when I was a teenager, I was born and raised in a thick place, a thick, big church. No running. No passing of notes. The preacher would call you down. Be quiet. Don't laugh. No matter how funny it is, don't laugh. Which makes you laugh harder, of course. Don't show any emotion. File in. Look your best. Give the impression of yourself and your cute kids that you want people to have. Oh, it was thick. Thick. And so as soon as I was old enough to skip, I started skipping. And I would take off my shoes. because I love to go barefooted. It's the way all of us came here, by the way. And I went some other place. I was ready to be anywhere. And I found a little trail behind our church that went back into a big patch of woods and some wide open fields in the dirt, with horses in the grass. And wow, and I would look up and I would sing because I was happy. And I'd sing because I was free. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. And I therefore know what these people are talking about when they say, well, I feel God's presence more in a deer stand than I do in a church. I feel God's presence more on the river. I used to preach so hard against that idea until I realized that while some of those people, no question, are just making excuses, some of those people are being gut level honest. And on what planet is honesty a bad thing? They were telling the truth. And I found thin places, in places that were not churchy at all. Thank God, though. Oh, I'm so thankful that there are thin place churches. And I've gotten to be in some of those through the years. And I found that though I was so tired of trying to penetrate this thick place, this first church I was raised in, I couldn't penetrate the social scene. And I couldn't penetrate into the worship service because it seemed so irrelevant to anything in my life. Man, you know what's funny? It's a little play on words, but 2 words I want to give you. First, irrelevant. This has nothing to do with me. Why am I here? What are they talking about? And there's another word called irreverent. Irreverent is when you're supposed to be paying attention, you're supposed to be honoring God, but you're pouring a Coke, or you're passing a note, or you're thinking about where you're going this afternoon. You're being irreverent. Oh, or you're a kid running in the sanctuary. You're being irreverent. Well, I'll say this. I'll tell you the most irreverent thing that comes to my mind in this moment. The most irreverent thing I know is to come to the house of God and find that it is irrelevant. I don't get it. What am I missing? At times, perhaps it was you. You were missing it. It was there, but you were missing it. None of us are always right here. There are other times that you missed it because it wasn't there. Now, am I saying that God wasn't there? Think about this. I mean, we know about the omnipresence of God. David talked about it. Where can I go from your presence? If I go to the bottom of the sea or the farthest mountain, even if I make my home in a grave, you're there. Where can I flee from your presence? That's totally true. But you know what else is true? While God's presence is everywhere, God's presence is not welcomed everywhere. God's presence is not felt everywhere. So what is it that makes for a thin place? A church you go to in God's home, and you can tell it when you walk through the door. What makes for that? It's got nothing to do with the architecture. I say that leading a church that is spending a lot of money to build the best possible facility we can manage. And it is awesome. And if you've not been lately, you're gonna flip your wig next week. I told somebody the other day, there's nothing like this between Fort Smith and Texarkana. I'm excited about that. But I'm more excited about the thing that's going to make that the house of God and God home. You know when God comes to church, when godly people come to church. You know when the Holy Spirit gets released in a church, it's when people like you, who are the temples of the Holy Spirit, it's when all 300 or more come to this place that's really just metal and brick and mortar and wood. When they come here, each one of you a temple, and you throw the doors open wide. And that means you throw the doors of your temple, your heart, open wide to everybody in the room. Those you know and those you don't know. Those people whom deep down you look down on, and they can tell it. Also, when you, who look down on yourself, are so afraid that somebody's going to reject you that you just get over in the corner like this. Nobody likes me. Don't talk to me. We give those signals off. There are people who give those signals off. I've done it before. And sure enough, nobody talked to me. How could they? What do you say to a person over here doing that? You'd have to be a psychologist or a minister to know what to say to them. But I'm saying, when all of us come in and we throw open the doors of our temple and let people in, and truth comes in and truth goes out, and love comes in and love goes out, joy comes in and joy comes out, and you know what happens then? They walk in the door and they feel His presence. Then they know this is a place where love abounds. It's the bottom line biblical truth is you are the temple. Is your temple open or is it closed for business? Is it a private temple where only certain people get to come? Or is it a temple that everyone who encounters you recognizes and feels? You have potential. You, every one of you, and I, and me. We have the potential to touch people in ways they've never been touched before. Now let me give you an example of what I mean. We talk straight here. We've got a mix of people here. All the educational levels, socioeconomic levels, social levels. But I want to point out an opportunity that many of you have, and I simply want to make you aware of it. I want you to be very aware of it, okay? Because once you become aware of it, I think you'll use the opportunity. We have a good many people in our church who are very well respected in this community, very well connected in this community. Your name is brought up and everybody knows exactly who you are. And that's a good thing. Very good thing. Especially if you know what to do with that opportunity. Because I know what it's like to grow up in a town the size of Mena and find the church social structure so thick I couldn't penetrate it because I wasn't cool enough. I didn't look good enough. I wasn't athletic enough. I wasn't from a fancy enough family or whatever. I couldn't penetrate that thickness. And I'm not belly aching about that. I'm saying I know what that's like. And you need to know, if you are popular and well thought of in this community, there are people in this room who are scared to death of you. They would never come up to you and start a conversation because they know the pecking order in Mena, Arkansas. They know you're here and they're there. Now, so far, nobody's done anything wrong. Hear me clearly. We're talking about opportunity here. Not ashamed, nothing shameful. They know who you are. But you probably don't know who they are. And if you do know who they are, you've never had reason to find out. Now, what if you this person they've known since kindergarten from a distance, but they never got to hang in your group. They weren't athletic enough or whatever. Their parents were in a different circle. What if you did what Jesus Christ did? And he looked for the weak. And he sought them out. And he looked into their eyes. And he said, I want to know you. Do you realize the power of that? Probably not, but I want you to start thinking about it. The majority of churches in any town, including this one, here's the way it works. The social structures that dictate the pecking order and who's who out in town and in the community come right on in the building with them. And that's the reason a lot of people won't go to a church if they know certain people are there that are better than them. And I don't say that sarcastically. I've been there. Those people are better than me. I would not dare bother them. I wouldn't even want to try to make them talk to me. Goodness, it wasn't a cynical, sarcastic thing. I felt so inferior. But what if something had happened that never happened actually? But it could happen in this group. What if those people sought out people like me? Like I was. Of course, you all talk to me. I'm the preacher, but I hadn't always been. And I hadn't always had something to offer. I'm saying, if we developed a genuine reputation like the early church had. And the reputation and the word gets out that at Christ Community Fellowship, it is a Christ fellowship, and everybody there is in the same community. Do you know one of the things that baffled the non-Christians, which was almost everybody, by the way, in the days of the early church? They thought it was absolutely absurd. They said, wealthy masters sit down at the table next to their slaves and act like the slave matters. How stupid. What kind of religion is that? It is the religion of Jesus Christ. And I'll say this. What we want is for Christ to feel at home here. We want Christ to feel at home here. I want to remind you what Jesus said. When you do it to the least of these, my brethren, you do it to me. So, with that in mind, let me put it this way. Very, very important statement. Christ is only as welcome at CCF. He is only as welcome here as the most undesirable person who may walk through the door. Sobering thought. True. 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 Now let me say this again. I'm not getting on anybody, because what I'm describing is actually already happening. I'm not talking to you about something we're not doing, that you're not doing. You are doing it. You were doing it before I even brought attention to it. And so now I'm making you keenly aware of it so that now you do it intentionally. And our reputation as a loving place to be, where you feel the presence of Christ, only grows. We're taking that with us. I'm putting that on my paper. That's going with us. But